Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey Recaps Below the Surface Edition. Today we are recapping chapter or book 21, titled by Emily Wilson as An Archery Contest. And while the main thing that happens is indeed an archery contest, this chapter is overall more concerned with Odysseus and his few allies solidifying their plans to retake the palace and readying for their attack. It's a coalescing, a moment when the shards of a broken family begin to reunite themselves back into a whole. Throughout the chapter, we also see moments where glimpses of the future seem to slip through. Just like we discussed in our previous recap, this creates an interesting effect where it feels like the audience is given the ability to see the strands of fate that are woven into mortal lives. Our chapter opens with Athena having put a thought into the mind of wise Penelope to go through with her plan to hold the archery contest. Once again, we are confronted with questions of mortal agency and the extent of the influence the gods have in mortal affairs and lives. Athena can manipulate the minds and bodies of mortals, making them see, do, or be whatever she wishes, or whatever best serves her goals. It's an uncomfortable reminder of the previous chapter where Athena had forced the suitors to insult and abuse the disguised Odysseus, to rile him and his son to maximum rage. Could Athena have gone in the opposite direction and put a thought in the mind of the suitors to leave peacefully? Does she crave violence and bloodshed? Or is this part of a larger plan, one not unlike her plan to send Telemachus on a journey to build confidence and a reputation for himself? Remember that Odysseus is not only returning late, but without the army and fleet he left with. Does Athena perhaps see this more as Odysseus reclaiming his throne in a way that would discourage challenges from disgruntled Ithacans? There's no way to know, but questions of choice, agency, and responsibility run throughout this entire poem. Penelope, unaware of the intrusions of the goddess in her mind, heads downstairs to set up the contest that the poem says would begin the slaughter, providing us with our first glimpse into the future. We know a slaughter is coming. It's inevitable. The doom that has stalked the suitors from the very first chapter is about to arrive. In her translator's note, Emily Wilson goes into a bit of detail about the crucial moment that Penelope opens the door to the weapons storeroom. She says that the Greek word Homer used to describe Penelope's hand in this moment, gripping the key, is pachus, meaning thick, a word that is often used to describe the hands of male warriors. But Wilson notes that Penelope is the only woman whose hands are described this way. Wilson wanted to choose an English word that better signified the importance of this unique descriptor. So instead of thick, she chose muscular, which not only conveys the warlike nature of the epithet, but is also rooted in reality, as Wilson notes that weaving does indeed make one's hands more muscular. She says it was very important to her that she chose a word that not only honors the original in its emphasizing of Penelope's physical competence, but one that also marks her as a character who plays a crucial part in the action, whether or not she knows what she is doing. So after this significant moment, Penelope and her slaves head into the storeroom and they locate Odysseus's great bow. Now, the bow has its own backstory, one that briefly intersects with another mythical hero and another moment of betrayed hospitality, which I won't get into now, but the bow is important specifically to Odysseus because it was given to him by a friend in an exchange that marked their bond, a friend that has since died, and now the bow holds the memory of Odysseus's beloved friend. Penelope cries when she sees the bow, but gathers herself and picks up the bow and a quiver full of deadly arrows, leaving her slaves to gather the 12 axes of bronze and iron, and heads off to meet the arrogant suitors. When she enters the room, she gives a short speech to the suitors, telling them that they keep coming to the palace each day to waste Odysseus's wealth, and their motives are no secret. She says, "You want to marry me. I am the prize." And so she says she will set a contest. If anyone can easily string Odysseus's great bow and shoot an arrow through all 12 axes, she will marry him and leave her beautiful house and the joyful life she lived there, though she says she will remember and dream about it forever. She tells the loyal swineherd to set up the axes for the contest, and he tearfully does so. The loyal cowherd is there and also weeps as the swineherd sets up the axes. The cruel suitor Antinous begins to taunt the weeping men, calling them names and saying their crying is upsetting Penelope, who is already sad enough after losing her beloved husband. He tells them to go cry outside and leave them to their deadly contest of the bows, although he admits he is worried that none of them will be able to match the strength of the heroic and godlike Odysseus. Then we are given another quick flash from the future. Immediately after Antinous' speech, the poem reads, "He hoped he would be first to string the bow and shoot through all the axes. but he would be the first to taste an arrow from the hands of great Odysseus, whom he had mocked, urging the others to do the same. As predicted, the suitor's inevitable doom has come, and there's no escaping now. Telemachus turns to address the suitors, telling them, "My dear mother, despite her usual common sense, has said that she will marry someone else and leave this house. But I am laughing, and my heart feels foolish gladness. Well, come on, you suitors. You want this prize, a woman unlike any." He goes on to praise Penelope before telling the suitors they know her worth and the time has come for them to fight for her. This is an interesting, if confusing, mix of emotions from Telemachus. He implies that Penelope giving in to the suitors isn't sensible, and yet he has been saying for a while now that if his father doesn't return soon, he knows his mother will have to remarry. And what of this foolish gladness filling his heart? Is this speech meant to confuse the suitors, or is his gladness at the slaughter to come? He goes on, saying that he will compete in the contest himself, saying that if he does succeed, he won't mind his mother going off to marry one of the suitors, as he will have proved himself man enough to carry his father's arms. This brings up an interesting point Emily Wilson makes in her introduction. What happens to Telemachus after his father takes back the throne? After all that has happened to him, he's no longer just a boy, but what place does he have in the castle once his father assumes the throne? He's worked hard to claim his role as head of the household, only to have to immediately cede it back to his father? There's a long history of volatile relationships and power struggles between fathers and sons throughout Greek mythology, starting, of course, with Zeus, the king of the gods, who overthrew his own father, the Titan Kronos, to claim dominion over the gods. And yet, I would argue that this story is about an unusual family, one with a mother who is as clever and cunning as a goddess, a father with legendary powers of intelligence and survival, and a son who is protected by a goddess and has survived assassination attempts by a small army of grown men. I'd like to think that if any family can find a way to overcome the odds to find a way to survive together, it's this one. Telemachus finishes setting up the contest, and the suitors are amazed to see his swift, confident movements. He tries to string the bow and fails 3 times. When he goes to try a 4th time, the disguised Odysseus catches his eye and shakes his head, stopping him. Telemachus stops and tells the suitors that he's too weak and useless, or perhaps he's too young and inexperienced at fighting. He tells the suitors that they are all stronger than him and they should begin the contest. He sets the bow down on the floor and returns to his chair. He and his father are working together seamlessly, putting the suitors at ease while communicating silently, working towards a common goal. The suitors begin the contest. The first to try is a holy man named Leodes, who we are told is the only one who disapproved of all their bullying. He cannot string the bow. He stands back and addresses the suitors, and in his speech we are given another small glimpse of the future. He says, "This bow will take away courage, life force, and energy from many noble young men. But better we should die than live and lose the goal for which we gather in this house every day." He goes on to say that they all wish to marry Penelope, but he thinks that if a suitor fails to string the bow, they should leave and just go court some other woman. Antinous jeers at him in his suggestion and mocks him for saying that the bow will take the life from proper men. He says Leodes wasn't born for archery, but the rest of the suitors are real warriors, and they will soon string the bow. Antinous then turns to the cruel goat herd and tells him to place a chair by the fire and bring a wheel of fat so that they can warm and grease the bow and make it easier to string and more pliable. Antinous and the other central main suitor, Eurymachus, stand back and watch as the rest of the suitors try to string the bow by the fire, but none of them are able to do it. Meanwhile, the loyal swineherd and goatherd have gone outside to weep, as directed by Antinous. The disguised Odysseus follows them out and says he is hesitant to ask, but he must be frank. If the gods should return Odysseus to them, how would they act? Would they be with the suitors or with their king? The swineherd and the cowherd beg Zeus to make this wish a reality. The cowherd says that if Odysseus were to return, then they would see how prepared he is to fight for his master. The swineherd agrees with the cowherd and also prays that the gods make this wish come true. Odysseus has made up his mind. He tells them that he is their missing king, that he has suffered for 20 years but he has finally come back home. He says they're the only 2 slaves who welcomed his arrival, which is a bit of a slap in the face to poor Eurycleia, but I guess these are the only 2 male slaves who welcomed his arrival. He tells them that if he succeeds in getting rid of the suitors, he will give each of them a wife, wealth, and a new constructed home close to his own, and they will be Telemachus's brothers. A bold offering to the two men. He then says that he knows they'll need proof, so he shows them his scar, the same one that led to Euryclea recognizing him. The two men study the scar and then burst into tears, throwing their arms around Odysseus, hugging him and kissing his face, and Odysseus embraces and kisses them in return. The warmth of this homecoming, the joy we see with these men, is genuinely moving. This is the same way that the swineherd greeted Telemachus when he returned home, which the narrator told us was like a father greeting his beloved son. The family is slowly being reunited, different than it was before maybe, but filled with love and joy nonetheless. After this brief but joyful reunion, Odysseus steps back and tells the men they must stop crying in case someone looks out the window and sees them. He tells them to return inside, but to stagger their entrances so as not to arouse suspicion. He says that he will ask to have an attempt at the competition, and when the suitors refuse, the swineherd must bring him the bow anyway, and that will be the signal to begin their destruction. The men must command the serving and slave women to go and lock themselves in their quarters and tell them not to come out no matter what they hear. They must stay silent in their rooms and work. He then tells the cowherd to go and lock and secure the gates leading out from the courtyard so that none of their victims can escape. He tells them to move fast, and then he leaves, returning to the suitors. When they've all slowly taken their places, it is Eurymachus' turn to string the bow. He tries to warm and grease it, but it still refuses to bend. Eventually he gives up, groaning and yelling in fury. He says, "This is disastrous for all of us. I do not even mind so much about the marriage. There are lots of other women on Ithaca and in other cities. But that we should have proven so much weaker than King Odysseus, that we should fail to string his bow. Our deep humiliation will be well known for many years to come." This is a fascinating admission, and maybe the true reason the suitors are occupying Ithaca. Perhaps what they really wish to steal is Odysseus' reputation and honor, along, of course, with his wife, home, and throne. But Antinous tells Eurymachus that they won't suffer humiliation at all, that none of them could string or shoot the bow, not out of personal failing or weakness, but because it's a feast day for Apollo, and they must stop what they're doing and honor the god with the feast. Then they can resume the contest after the god of archery has been properly honored. All the suitors agree with him, and the serving boys begin to mix up more wine for them to drink, and also to offer as libations to the gods. Odysseus is ready. He speaks to the suitors, telling them that as the contest is paused, he would like to try the bow. He says he wishes to try his strength and find out if his hands still have the suppleness and vigor of his youth, or if it has been lost in all his years of homelessness and poverty. This is a moment where I think Odysseus' false identity and his real identity blur together a bit. He has been gone for 20 years. He has suffered and lost everything he had. He has led men to victory and to death. Is he still the same Odysseus who left? Does he still have the same strength and skills he had before? This competition was never just about who can string this bow. It was always about who could live up to Odysseus' memory. And now Odysseus is putting himself to the test. The suitors are nervous. They've seen his strength in his fight with the other beggar, and they're worried that he will be able to string the bow. Antinous insults him, telling him he should be grateful they let him stay and eat with them and hear their conversations at all. Antinous says he must be drunk, that wine does have that effect on those who gulp and fail to pace themselves, showing that at least on some level Antinous is aware that greed has a cost. He rambles on, recounting a myth about a wine-crazed centaur whose drinking led to disaster at the hands of enraged warriors, and ends by making the comparison painfully clear. His drinking was harmful to himself. If you should string that bow, it would be worse for you, and threatens to send the beggar to the king of cruelty, the same king who he had previously used as a threat, the one who likes to cut off various parts of his subjects' anatomy and feed them to his dogs. Antinous gives the beggar a final order. Sit quietly, drink up, and do not quarrel with younger men. Penelope steps in at this moment and tells Antinous that he's wrong to disrespect a guest that Telemachus has welcomed into the house. She asks what he thinks he's going to happen. That if the beggar successfully does string the bow and shoots through the arrows, that she, a queen, will go off and marry and live with him, a beggar? Of course not, she says. And of course, the beggar knows that that won't happen. Antinous doesn't need to spoil the feast by worrying about such things, she says. In this moment, knowingly or not, all three members of the family are working together to get the suitors where Odysseus wants them to be. They're working together perfectly, and Penelope has stepped in at the exact right time, using the exact right tone and words to diffuse the situation and allow Odysseus to carry out his plans. Eurymachus steps in and tells Penelope that it is indeed unlikely that she should marry the beggar, but that they would all feel ashamed if the beggar can do it and they cannot. He asks, what if some people call the suitors weak and say they court a fighter's wife but cannot string his bow? And if some random beggar can, then they'll all be humiliated. Penelope turns to him and she says, Eurymachus, people who waste the riches of a king have lost their dignity. Why fuss at this? Which is just fantastically brutal. I would leave that in there. I'd never be able to recover from that burn. It was fantastic. But Eurymachus doesn't leave, and Penelope carries on, telling them that if the beggar manages to string the bow and shoot through the 12 axes, she won't marry him. She'll just give him some clothes and weapons and help him on his journey to wherever it is that he wishes to go. But then Telemachus steps in and tells his mother that he is the one who decides who gets the bow, and that no man in the house can force his hand. He can do what he wants with the bow, even give it away if that's what he wants. Then he tells her that she must return to her weaving and tell her slave girls to do the same. The bow is work for men, especially for him, as he is the one with power in the house. Is this a neat way for him to remove his mother from the room before the slaughter begins? Or is there something else at play here? In her introduction, Emily Wilson notes that this particular speech seems to allude to a moment in the Iliad when Hector tells his wife that he must go to the battlefield, as that is the work of an elite male warrior, and the role of women is to do household chores and weave. Wilson sees this similar moment as Telemachus attempting to assert his masculinity and adult status, and is assuming the role of a heroic fighter risking his life for honor and the defense of his city. Though, she says, the comparison isn't perfect, as Telemachus isn't trying to claim the bow to fight with. Instead, he intends to pass it to his father, who is the one who actually is trying to regain control of the palace. Regardless, this is an interesting point of similarity between the two poems and the two men. Penelope is amazed at her son and does as he says, returning to her room to sit with her girls and weep for her husband until once again Athena blesses her with sleep. Meanwhile, as instructed, the loyal swineherd picks up the bow and brings it to the disguised Odysseus. The suitors are enraged, hurling threats and abuse at him. The man is terrified, but Telemachus calls out to him, once again referring to him as grandpa, telling him that he is the master, not the suitors, and if the slave doesn't obey, Telemachus will chase him into the fields and pelt him with stones. He says he is stronger than the elderly swineherd, and he wishes that he could overcome all the suitors as easily as he could overcome the elderly swineherd. This seems needlessly cruel to a man who loves Telemachus so dearly, and we are forced again to wonder if the last 4 years of Telemachus' life have been shaped by the suitors' cruelty, or if this is simply the way the elite treat the slaves, no matter how loyal they are. I can't help but remember when the devoted Eurycleia discovers Odysseus' true identity, and he immediately grabs her by the throat and threatens her. The cruel words do seem to serve a purpose, though. The suitors laugh at what Telemachus has said, and their anger at him is gone, and the anger at the swineherd is gone, and the tension is broken. The swineherd carries on and hands the bow to Odysseus, and then, as instructed, he goes and finds Eurycleia and tells her that Telemachus has ordered her to leave and lock all the doors into the hall and tie them fast, and then take all the women and lock them in the women's quarters and stay there, quiet and working, no matter what they hear below. Eurycleia does as he asks without comment, and the loyal cowherd follows her, securing other doors and exits himself before locking the gates to the palace themselves and rushing back in and sitting in wait, staring at Odysseus, ready for the signal to begin their attack. Odysseus is looking at his bow, handling it, checking it over. The suitors marvel at his attention and wonder if he once owned a bow. And so the text reads, Odysseus had tricked them all. After examining the bow carefully, Odysseus strings the bow with ease, as a musician strings a lyre. He holds it and plucks at the string, which sang like a swallow song, a clear, sweet note. The suitors are horrified and grow pale, and Zeus sends down an ominous roll of thunder. Odysseus, who had so long been waiting, is glad to hear the omen, and he picks up a single arrow from the quiver, a quiver packed with arrows soon to be used, giving us our final glimpse into the future. Odysseus knocks the arrow and, still sitting in his chair, takes careful aim and shoots. The arrow flies cleanly through each of the 12 axes and out the other side. Odysseus turns to his son and says, "Telemachus, your guess does you a credit. I hit all the targets and with no effort strung the bow. I am still strong, despite their jibes about my weakness. Though it is daytime, it is time to feast, and later we can celebrate with music, the joyful part of dinner." He signals with his eyebrows, and Telemachus understands, and straps on his sword, picks up his spear, and stands beside his father, bronze weapons flashing in the firelight. And that's where our chapter ends. Join us next time for chapter 22, titled simply Bloodshed. Although I do warn you, it is a very, very gory and intense chapter, so maybe take a break before you carry on. But I will see you guys there.